underwater processes are unfolding in South Caucasus at a very slow pace, is a pre-signed document fleshing out. In China, Mr. Aliyev called the Trump route the crux of the Trump-brokered peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Zangezur Corridor, which to Armenia implies territorial claims. Again, was this a first sign of stepping back from agreements or just a gesture to not rub sores for Asian leaders? Time will show. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Is the Trump-brokered peace actualizing?
It's the first step to peace. It's a very important milestone, but in order to turn it into a real, sustainable, implementable peace, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And first of all, that work needs to be done by Azerbaijan and Armenia. And second of all, we need very robust American facilitation or mediation in order to achieve the further steps, as well as, why not, the European Union mediation. And we know that Azerbaijan has been trying to delegitimize European Union, France, and other actors as mediators. However, he did accept Trump's administration's mediation, which is good news, and hopefully now they will have some leverage in order to encourage Azerbaijan to actually sign the peace agreement, because it hasn't signed the peace agreement. Azerbaijan has only initialed the peace.
Is Trump administration policing over the agreement they brokered? Well, they should. Arrangements might fall through if they do not. The peace agreement initialed in Washington includes a commitment to renounce intolerance, racial hatred, and discrimination. But right after signing it, Aliyev calls the transport link through Armenia the trip, or Trump's route, Zangezur Corridor, which implies extraterritorial ambitions, and calls the Armenian society sick. Improvements in rhetoric and attitude indicate whether the sides are serious about their commitments. As you yourself mentioned, peace is about intertwined interests, and it is of utmost importance that it glides from paper to the ground. Infrastructure and open borders inclusive. Do you see this happening?
Again, it requires a lot of work. So if we look at the Washington Declaration signed and apparently trip, Trump Road for Peace and Prosperity is the centerpiece of this declaration. It is quite generic. It sets up very important principles, which is, first of all, that everything should be carried out in line with the principles of territorial integrity, sovereignty, and also taking into account Armenia's jurisdiction and legislation. However, in order to achieve its practical and reciprocal implementation, I think that the parties, and when I say parties, I mean not only Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also US, need to develop a roadmap, which needs to really present an action plan, how all of this is going to be implemented, because there are a lot of ambiguities. And the thing with ambiguities in legal and normative documents is tricky, because the party which is more powerful in this situation, of course, we have a power imbalance between Azerbaijan and Armenia for obvious reasons, military balance, etc., and the history of the use of military force. There is a danger that the party that has more military capabilities and more political leverage may once more try to abstain from its own implementation and respect for the modalities agreed, and come up with its own interpretations, or rather misinterpretations, of the documents. For instance, this issue of reciprocity. First of all, Azerbaijan has been already trying to claim that it has achieved its desired Zangezur Corridor, which is not exactly the case, because Zangezur Corridor, that was the joint project by Baku and Moscow, at times also echoed by Turkey, was a project of extraterritorial corridor through Armenia, to which Armenia itself wouldn't have access. So it would completely lose its control over that road, and Azerbaijan, Russia, and most likely also Turkey would control and exploit it for their own use. And this would be very tricky, because even military equipment or armaments or personnel could be transferred. Armenian-Iranian border would be severed, and Armenia itself would not be able to use this road. However, what we have through TRIP should be different. Any goods or any cargo, any passengers from Azerbaijan need to go through checkpoints and control. However, as we know, Azerbaijan has stated that they don't want to see any Armenian border guard or any Armenian customs officials.
Armenia has promised to implement simplified transit procedures and automated mechanisms for Azerbaijan to reach Nakhichevan. How about the principle of reciprocity? Do Armenians get the same access? And if not, then should we say they were not being unblockaded?
There are two issues here. First of all, when Azerbaijan says uninhibited, and it is also in the document, it doesn't mean that Armenian legislation should not be taken into consideration. It still needs to all the goods and passengers still needs to be transferred under the Armenian jurisdiction and legislation, even if there is a third-party operator, which may be an American or a foreign company. The second issue is that it's not exactly the same, so there is no a complete parity, but Armenia will not have this preferential treatment when it transfers its cargo or passengers through Azerbaijan, which is, of course, an issue because there may be security concerns by the Armenian side. Most likely, it's easier to manage when you transfer cargo, but it would be more tricky when you transfer passengers. I'm sure that it's not going to happen anytime soon because there is no enough confidence, trust between the two parties. However, hopefully, Azerbaijan will at least deblock its roads for transportation of Armenian cargo as a good start. And then maybe over years, trust will be built, and then it will be more favorable environment for transfer of other goods and who knows, maybe also passengers, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Connectivity is the meat of the pre-signed peace agreement. The EU is deepening its connectivity through the Middle Corridor that will link Central Asia to Europe through Azerbaijan and Georgia. The president of the European Commission suggested that Armenia joins the Middle Corridor, but President Ilham Aliyev rejected the idea. Do you think we can do so now that the peace agreement has been pre-signed?
That's a very good question. Indeed, Azerbaijan's President Aliyev immediately dismissed the proposal coming from the President of the European Commission in April. However, things have changed a little with
quite a bit, in fact.
Washington Declaration. However, I would love to believe that Azerbaijan has changed its position. However, so far it has been a month, right, since the signature of the Washington Declaration, and I don't see any encouraging signals that Azerbaijan is ready to ensure Armenia's connectivity and transportation of Armenia's cargo to begin with through its territory. And this is exactly when the US and European Union need to do their part of mediation.
When it comes to connectivity, the devil's in the details. All parties need to work closely to achieve reciprocity, the expert says, or reciprocity is not happening. A long way to go. Hopefully, Armenia does become part of the Middle Corridor. This is the direction in which we are currently looking. When do you believe the signing of the peace agreement will follow, and will it follow at all?
I think that if Azerbaijan's President Aliyev really wanted to sign the peace agreement, it would have signed it in Washington, D.C. The reason it didn't is that Baku is not really interested in signing the peace agreement, and that's why it still keeps its precondition, which is mainly at this point change of the Armenian constitution. And it's not genuine because, first of all, we know
Why
that...
Why pre-sign, beg your pardon, if you are planning to sabotage?
Because it's some demonstration of a goodwill. Most likely it's not so sincere, and it's also in order to get carrots from Washington, D.C., from the European Union. I would really love to believe that Baku is sincere in its intentions to sign the peace agreement. However, I still think that this precondition of the change of the Armenian constitution is an indicator that Baku's intentions are not genuine. Why? Because Baku knows quite well that it creates a perception or misperception in the Armenian society that if Armenian constitution is going to be changed as part of domestic constitutional reform plan still before 2020 war, still there is this perception in the public that it is being done under Baku's pressure. And this is going to backfire because, the threshold for constitutional reform is quite high. And in order to ensure that a high percentage of the population of Armenia will go and vote favorably for the change of constitution, we don't need this perception. But Baku is doing everything to create and reinforce this perception. And I think that it's part of Baku's cognitive warfare against Armenia. So it wants to show to its population that it has conducted a complete victory, military victory, cognitive victory, lawfare victory, and it's not going to lead to anything positive. And if this constitutional referendum fails, which is possible because we are not an authoritarian country, we are a democracy, even if it's still kind of hybrid democracy, very imperfect democracy, but we have a pluralistic society, and we cannot guarantee that people will really vote favorably. And it's not about being against peace, no. It's about the fact that people feel that this change may lead to the sense of crisis of their historical memory and national identity. And then Baku may say, oh, you see, Armenia is not ready for peace, and completely abandon the peace process. And I think Baku is very well aware of similar precedents from other countries. For instance, in Cyprus, Kofi Annan's plan was basically voted unfavorably by the Greek population of Cyprus.
What's the exit then? If you have what you have presented now is not a conspiracy theory, but rather a description of Aliyev's intentions in the future, that is to look constructive by pre-signing an agreement, and then the Armenian society probably fails the referendum on constitution, which is a precondition, and then the peace is sabotaged by Armenia. Right? What's the exit then?
The exit is that I think that it's very important to ensure that Baku signs this agreement before actually the Armenian
and without the precondition.
And constitutional reform. Preconditions should be unacceptable, but my impression is that not only Baku keeps raising this precondition, but also now there are hints that Baku may expect Armenia to start already implementing a peace agreement that hasn't been signed, while of course it is not going to implement the peace agreement itself. And we know that there are sensitive provisions there, such as withdrawal of international lawsuits from ICJ and ECHR, the withdrawal of Yuma, not from the country, but from patrolling on the border. But it's clearly...
all this should follow the signature of the peace agreement, not precede it.
Exactly. And, you know, on our side, we have all right to expect that Azerbaijan will completely abandon its Western Azerbaijan narrative, which is an expansionist claim to Armenia, and our side agreed on the dissolution of the OSCE Minsk group with actually that condition back in March, that we don't want Azerbaijan close Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and then transport the conflict from its internationally recognized territory to Armenia's internationally recognized territory, constantly sponsoring these organizations like Western Azerbaijan, insert those revisionist historical false narratives in textbooks and promote it through academia of sciences, etc., etc. And we had a report that this Western Azerbaijan state-sponsored NGO has been dissolved, but then it turned out to be disinformation, because you can go and check that you will see that they still have a functional website and they still hold events. And this is something that needs to be done now, because it is about preparing the population for peace. And I think that our authorities, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, other officials, have been doing their best in order to prepare Armenian public for the peace. And sometimes they take very big risks. They advocate for new narratives. They break taboos that were really a taboo in the Armenian society for decades. So they take a lot of courage. But I really don't see...
And this courage is going to cost them votes,
yes,
obviously.
Because it affects their ranking.
And Aliyev
right?
should do the same if we talk about the principle of reciprocity.
Yes, but Aliyev is not consistent, because if we follow his speeches after 8 August, there have been a couple of speeches where he changed his rhetoric to a more
lenient,
moderate, softer. However, it wasn't consistent, because after 2 days he went to Kelbajar and once more he started labeling and stigmatizing Armenian society, for instance, as a Sikh society. And this is very dangerous. And he again didn't release Armenian captives. He's not releasing also Azerbaijani peace builders and peace activists. Why are they in prison, those people?
Good question. Back to Armenia. EU membership bill, a CO membership bid, on the other hand, diversification strategy, a number of strategic partnerships signed with the US, then China, Iran, the Netherlands, the UK very recently. Georgia, what's the practical outcome of all these documents?
I think we have never seen such active Armenian foreign diplomacy.
True.
Since our independence. So this is unprecedented. It's even difficult to catch up with it. On one side, this is very positive, because
a strategic partnership every few days, basically.
Yes, we are living in a very turbulent period in international relations, and the world has become multipolar, and the old recipes don't work in international relations anymore. These concepts like pivoting to only one pillar, like to Euro-Atlantic pillar, is not so relevant as it was 5 years ago. And in our geographical situation, when we are basically right between Europe and Asia, we don't even know whether we are geographically in Europe or Asia. Different encyclopedias say a different story. So it's very important to have balanced relationship with different polars. However, it's also very sensitive and sometimes tricky. So on one side, of course, me as somebody who is dreaming about seeing Armenia in the European Union one day, I still believe that we should keep European integration as our not long-term but mid-term very important objective. And I wouldn't like to see that important objective to be jeopardized by other partnerships. However, I think that European Union is quite understanding, and it understands our sensitivities, and that we really need to manage and mitigate risks in a very difficult environment. And we have economic cooperation issues, and we need to balance our relations with Russia and Iran and India and now also China. And if we are able to manage all of those relationships, not to cross any red lines for other partners, but to use those partnerships in order to reduce our dependency on one particular actor or polar, I think this is positive. However, I am very eager to see our strategic partnerships with France and India, because I think that those two countries are exactly de facto strategic partners for Armenia in the last 3 years. However, we still haven't formalized strategic partnerships with those two countries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.